The October night in Manhattan was bitterly cold. Yet inside the Plaza Hotel, the air was warm and sparkling with light. Crystal chandeliers hanging from the ballroom ceiling cast a gentle golden glow that danced across tailored tuxedos and lavish evening gowns. The sound of violins mingled with sophisticated laughter. The aroma of costly perfume blended with the fragrance of white orchids meticulously arranged on every table. This was the Whitaker Foundation's annual charity gala, an event that drew New York's elite, Wall Street investors, television celebrities, and even politicians chasing the spotlight. But the focal point of the evening was James Whitaker, a self-made white American millionaire who had turned a fledgling startup dream into a multi-billion-dollar real estate empire. James stood at the main entrance as camera flashes popped incessantly. His black tuxedo, custom-made by a Savile Row tailor, fit him like armor. Light brown hair was neatly combed back, and the flashes highlighted his icy blue eyes and confident smile. At 38, James embodied success. Once a poor student in Brooklyn, he had reached the pinnacle through intellect, daring, and a touch of natural charm. Silver cufflinks gleamed at his wrists, each engraved with JW as a statement of power. When security drew the red velvet rope aside, he strode onto the marble walkway, every footstep deliberate. The crowd parted, their eyes, investors, journalists, high society, fixed on him as if he were the center of the universe. Yet James had not come to command the evening. Inside him, another script was quietly unfolding, one unknown even to his close assistant, Claire. 16 years earlier, he had left a woman named Simone Carter to chase ambition in San Francisco. With deep brown eyes and a heart full of ideals, Simone had once meant everything to him. Together, they had dreamed of a future, of a socially conscious investment firm. But when the opportunity appeared, James chose to leave, abandoning Simone and the promises whispered under Brooklyn's starry sky. He had since heard that she was now the director of a community center in Harlem, living a modest life far from the limelight. Learning that Simone had accepted tonight's invitation, James told himself this was his chance to prove he had been right, that leaving had been necessary, that he had surpassed anything she ever imagined. Part of him wanted her to see the man who had conquered New York and feel regret. James discreetly searched with his eyes as he moved through the crowd, exchanging handshakes and polite smiles. Claire murmured in an elegant gray suit that a significant investor was waiting at the VIP table. James dipped his chin, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He wanted to see Simone, to meet her gaze and read something there, admiration, envy, or simply acknowledgement. Though the gala bore a charitable label, this was his stage to tell his story of rising from nothing, and Simone, whether she liked it or not, would be in the audience. At the far corner of the ballroom, beneath the dim glow of candlelight, Simone Carter stood quietly, her hands clasping those of her twin sons, Malik and Jamal. Her navy evening gown, simple yet elegant, had been borrowed from a friend and hugged her slender frame. A black American woman of 37, Simone possessed a natural beauty that needed no cosmetics to shine. But she did not wish to stand out. She wanted to blend in, fulfill her mission, and leave immediately. 16 years of single motherhood in Harlem had taught her to stand firm under probing stares and murmurs about a strong but lonely woman. Her community center, helping teenagers avoid street violence, faced looming budget cuts. Colleagues had all but begged her to attend, hoping the Whitaker Foundation might fund them. "This is our only chance, Simone," they'd said. She had hesitated, finger hovering over the decline button on the emailed invitation. Yet, in the end, she came, not for James, but for the center's children and Malik and Jamal, who deserved a better future. Malik and Jamal, 15, wore identical charcoal gray suits and stood close to their mother. Malik, slightly taller, had sharp eyes and a guarded stance, as if always ready to protect her. Jamal, more timid, kept his gaze on the floor, fingers tightly woven. Both sensed their mother's tension, but did not fully grasp why. "Mom, why do we have to be here?" Malik whispered, irritation coloring his tone. Simone gave a faint smile and squeezed his hand. "Just a couple of hours, baby." For the center. But inside her, a storm churned. Watching James on stage, confident and assertive, she remembered long nights alone in the hospital cradling newborn twins and the years fighting to raise them in a neighborhood weighted by prejudice. James, who had promised he would return, never had. And now he stood there as though the world belonged to him. The violins faded, and James stepped onto the central dais. He adjusted the microphone with practiced ease, his perfect smile melting the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his warm baritone filling the hall. "I am honored to welcome you to this year's Whitaker Charity Gala. Tonight is not just about success, but about change, opportunity, and the power of giving." Applause rose, but James continued. He told of his journey, from a poor, nameless boy in Brooklyn to the man before them. He said, "I once had nothing but a dream and sheer will," his eyes sweeping the room until they settled on Simone's corner. "Some people believed in me. Some did not." His smile stayed polished, yet now carried a blade-thin edge. "Time is extraordinary," he said, his voice measured and laden with implications. "One day, you share borrowed textbooks in a college library. Another day, you stand here, repaying a community that once doubted you." The crowd murmured, feeling the tension. Malik glanced at his mother, brow furrowed. "Is he talking about you, Mom?" he whispered. Simone did not answer, but her grip tightened. James was playing a dangerous game, and she had no intention of standing by and taking it. Beneath the dim glow of the candles on the banquet tables, Simone Carter stood quietly in a far corner of the Plaza Hotel ballroom, both hands clasping those of her twin sons, Malik and Jamal. Her navy evening gown, borrowed from a close friend, hugged her slender frame. Its cut was simple yet elegant, with no flamboyant makeup or costly jewelry to accompany it. A 37-year-old Black American woman, Simone carried a natural beauty forged through years as a single mother in Harlem, where she had faced inquisitive stares and whispers about the strong but lonely woman. Her deep brown eyes reflected the crystal lights, yet the look within them was not admiration or a longing to belong. It was the gaze of someone suppressing a storm of emotion, someone who did not wish to be here yet, was compelled to attend for reasons larger than herself. Malik, 15, stood at his mother's left, slightly taller than Jamal, eyes sharp and posture guarded. His charcoal gray suit, rented from a local shop, pinched a bit at the shoulders. Yet Malik stood upright, as if ready to shield his mother from any threat. Jamal, the shyer of the two, stood at her right, fingers woven tightly before his stomach, eyes cast down at the glittering marble floor. He looked contemplative, trying to withdraw from the gala's light and noise. Both boys felt their mother's tension, even if they did not fully grasp its source. "Mom, why do we have to be here?" Malik whispered irritation in his voice, brows knitted. Simone squeezed his hand lightly, forcing a smile. "Just a few hours, son, for the center." Yet inside her, painful memories rose like waves, pulling her back 16 years to the idealistic young woman who had loved a man named James Whitaker. Simone was the director of the Harlem Community Center, which offered after-school programs to keep teenagers away from street violence and help them find their dreams. The center was her life work, but its budget was growing ever tighter. She hesitated when the Whitaker Foundation's gala invitation arrived in her inbox. Unsigned, addressed simply to Simone Carter, Harlem Community Center. Her finger hovered over decline dozens of times, her heart pounding whenever she thought of James, the man who had promised to return and never did. She knew this gala was a chance to seek funding, perhaps to save the center from closure. Her colleagues, especially Aisha, had virtually begged. "Simone, the Whitaker Foundation has money. They're looking for community projects. You have to go." Ultimately, she agreed, not for James, but for the children at the center, and for Malik and Jamal, who deserved a better future. Yet, standing here, in the glittering light of an unfamiliar world, Simone felt like she was stepping into the domain of the man who had broken her heart. Watching James on the central dais, tuxedoed and confidently smiling, Simone felt a stab in her chest. He was still the James she had loved. Light brown hair, icy blue eyes, a warm baritone that could melt an entire hall. But he was also the James who had left her, choosing a job offer in San Francisco over remaining in Brooklyn, where they had once dreamed of a socially minded investment firm. She remembered long nights alone in the hospital, giving birth to twins, cradling Malik and Jamal while tears fell silently as she realized she would raise them alone. She remembered the years of struggle in Harlem, working 3 shifts to pay rent, hearing the whispers that a single black mother would never be good enough. James knew none of that. He had flown away and never looked back. Malik and Jamal, though unaware of the whole story, sensed the shift in their mother. In a quiet voice, Jamal asked Mom who that man was. Simone drew a deep breath, keeping her tone calm. "Just the organizer, honey." But, quicker to perceive, Malik followed her gaze and recognized James on stage. "You don't like him, do you, Mom?" he asked, low but steady. Simone did not answer. She merely squeezed both their hands more tightly. She did not want her sons dragged into her past. Yet James's presence, with all its glamour and power, resurrects old wounds. James continued his speech on the dais, his voice smooth yet edged. He said, "I once had nothing but a dream and sheer will," his eyes sweeping the hall and halting at Simone's corner. "Some people believed in me. Some did not." His smile remained polished, but Simone saw his intent. He was speaking about her, about the days they shared borrowed textbooks in the university library, the times she challenged his ambition, telling him that money isn't everything. James was turning her into a chapter of his success story, but not with respect. It was a covert blow, a way to assert that he had been right to leave, that her doubts had fueled his triumph. The audience applauded, yet the sound never reached Simone. She felt heat rush to her face, her heart pounding. Malik watched her, brow furrowed. "What is he saying about you?" he whispered suspiciously. Jamal, though silent, lifted his head, worry in his eyes. Simone knew she could not remain still. James might be the master of this gala, but she was not a spectator in his tale. She inhaled deeply, released her son's hands, and stepped forward, high heels clicking against the marble floor. Each stride declared that she was not here to be mocked. "Mr. Whitaker," she called, not loudly, but clearly, her voice echoing through the suddenly hushed hall. Adjusting the microphone, James froze, the smile on his lips stiffening. "This gala is meant to help the community," Simone continued, eyes locked on him, not to show off. The entire ballroom fell into stunned silence, whispers rippling like waves. Malik and Jamal stood behind their mother, their expressions wavering between pride and concern. James, for the first time that evening, lost his composure. He looked at Simone, and for an instant, the past resurfaced. The young woman with the radiant smile, who had once been his entire world. Light from the crystal chandeliers of the Plaza Hotel ballroom flickered across James Whitaker's black tuxedo, highlighting every meticulous stitch. On the central dais, he adjusted the microphone with practiced ease, his flawless smile melting the crowd. His deep, warm voice filled the hall with the confidence of a man accustomed to the spotlight. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I am deeply honored to welcome you to this year's Whitaker Charity Gala. Tonight is not only about success, but about change, opportunity, and the power of giving." The audience applauded. Wall Street investors, television celebrities, and politicians nodded their approval. Yet James was not speaking merely to win their favor. In his mind, another script was unfolding, one aimed squarely at Simone Carter, the woman he had loved and left 16 years earlier. James knew exactly where Simone was in the crowd. He had seen her when he entered, standing quietly in a distant corner, dressed in a simple navy gown with 2 boys at her side. The sight sent a pang through his heart, but also stirred something else, a pride laced with resentment. He wanted her to see him now, a self-made millionaire who had conquered New York, proof that his decision to leave for San Francisco had been right. His speech, draped in philanthropic language, was his way of retelling his story, with Simone cast as a minor character, the one who once doubted him and failed to see his potential. "I was once a poor boy in Brooklyn," James continued, his voice measured as his gaze swept the hall. "No one knew my name. I had no sponsors, no tuxedo, only a dream and the will to chase it." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Some people believed in me, some did not." His smile remained debonair, yet now carried a razor-thin edge. He looked toward the corner where Simone stood, locking eyes for a heartbeat. "Time is extraordinary," he said, lowering his voice, laden with implication. "Back then, you shared borrowed textbooks in a dimly lit college library, debating the future. One day, you stand here, repaying a community that once doubted you." The audience murmured, sensing the underlying tension. Simone Carter stood motionless in the corner, gripping Malik and Jamal's hands. James's words flew like arrows straight at her. Heat flushed her face. Her heart hammered in her chest. He was turning their past, those long afternoons in the Brooklyn Library, promises made under a star-strewn sky, into a chapter of his triumph. But he was silent about the cost of that triumph. The nights she cried alone in the hospital, cradling newborn twins. The years she worked 3 shifts in Harlem to raise Malik and Jamal. The neighbors' scrutinizing looks. The whispered judgment that a single black mother would never be enough. James knew none of it. He had left and never looked back. Malik, sharp-eyed, sensed the change in his mother. "What's he saying about you?" he whispered suspiciously, brows knitted. Shy but alert, Jamal lifted his gaze, worry in his eyes. "Mom, who is he?" he asked softly. Simone drew a deep breath, fighting for composure. "Just the organizer, sweetheart," she managed, though her voice trembled. Part of her wanted to flee the lights and painful memories, but a stronger part, the part that had carried her through 16 hard years, refused to stand down. James might own this gala, but she was no spectator in his story. On stage, James pressed on, his tone smooth yet barbed. "I want to thank those who once doubted me," he said, raising his wine glass, eyes again finding Simone. "Your doubt lit the fire inside me. Without it, I might never have pursued excellence with every ounce of my strength." The room erupted in applause that never reached Simone. She felt stripped bare before hundreds of eyes. Her past paraded for entertainment. Malik squeezed her hand. anger flashing in his gaze. "He's mocking you, Mom," he whispered, voice quivering with outrage. Jamal stepped closer, as if to shield her. Simone knew she could not let James continue. He might have power, money, and the spotlight, but she had her pride, and Malik and Jamal. 2 reasons never to bow. She inhaled, released her son's hands, and strode forward. Her high heels tapped a steady rhythm on the marble floor, each step a declaration. The crowd parted, all eyes on her. Malik and Jamal remained behind, torn between pride and worry. James, winding toward the close of his speech, froze at the sound of her footsteps. He looked up, the smile on his lips turning rigid. "Mr. Whitaker," Simone called, not loud, but crystal clear, her voice echoing in the suddenly hushed hall. Investors and photographers alike swung toward her. "This gala is meant to help the community," she said, eyes locked on James, not to show off or settle personal scores. Her words were a stone flung into a still pond, sending ripples of astonishment. Cameras flashed in rapid bursts. For the first time that evening, James lost his composure. He stared at Simone, and for a moment, the past flashed before him. The young woman with the radiant smile who had challenged, loved, and believed in him. Yet now she stood not as a memory, but a force to be reckoned with. Malik squeezed Jamal's hand, whispering, "Mom did it." Jamal nodded, eyes brightening. But both felt the heavy air, as though a great secret awaited. James, struggling to regain control, forced a thin smile. "Miss Carter," he said, voice unsteady. "I didn't expect to see you here. And these 2 boys, who are they?" He gestured toward Malik and Jamal as if to redirect attention. Simone did not falter. She stepped closer, gaze unwavering. "They are my sons," she replied, voice calm yet powerful. "Malik and Jamal." The ballroom fell silent, unaware that her simple statement was the prelude to a truth about to upend James Whitaker's world. The Plaza Hotel ballroom fell into silence, broken only by the staccato of camera shutters sparking like tiny bolts of lightning in the dark. Light from the crystal chandeliers bounced off the marble floor, illuminating the figure of Simone Carter, standing tall at the center of the crowd, her deep brown eyes locked on James Whitaker. Moments earlier, she had stunned the room with a calm yet cutting declaration. "They are my sons, Malik and Jamal." Though softly spoken, her words rang out like an irrefutable decree. From Wall Street investors to celebrity photographers, every gaze was now fixed on her and the 2 boys behind her, waiting for whatever would come next. On the dais, James felt the floor drop away beneath him. The polished smile he had perfected at hundreds of galas vanished, replaced by bewilderment few had ever seen on his face. He looked at Simone, then Malik and Jamal, 2 15-year-old boys in identical charcoal suits. Malik stood straight, sharp-eyed, and defiant, ready to shield his mother from anything. Jamal, more timid, lowered his head, fingers entwined, yet his glance flickered toward James with a mix of curiosity and doubt. For an instant, time stopped. Something about them, the chill in Malik's gaze, like his own at that age, the slight slope of Jamal's shoulders, a mirror of an old college photograph, sent James's heart pounding. Sensing his hesitation, Simone took one step forward, her voice hardening. "They are our sons, James." The words detonated like a slow-fused bomb, unleashing a wave of shocked whispers. Flashbulbs burst in rapid succession, desperate to capture every split second. Some guests covered their mouths, murmuring to neighbors. Others stood frozen, scarcely daring to breathe. Dazed, James let the microphone slip. The metallic clang on the floor rang thin and final. He stepped down from the platform, legs leaden, eyes glued to Simone and the boys. "Simone," he stammered, voice unsteady. "What are you saying?" Simone met his gaze without flinching. "Malik and Jamal are your sons," she repeated, low but resolute. "You left before I knew I was pregnant. You never asked, never came back." Her words carried not just fact, but indictment. The weight of 16 years of pain, sacrifice, and resilience. Inside her, two impulses wrestled. One urging her to shout out the anguish of nights alone in the hospital, of years navigating Harlem's hardships as a single mother. The other, the measured will that built a community center, held her steady. She would not crumble before her children. Only a few steps away, James felt drained of strength. He stared at Malik, then at Jamal, the uncanny resemblance stealing his breath. I didn't know," he whispered, the sound catching. "Simone, I swear, I didn't think you were pregnant." He moved closer, but Malik stepped forward, blocking him, anger flashing in his eyes. "Stay back," Malik said, voice cold. Jamal, silent, gripped his mother's hand, wavering between fear and confusion. Around them, murmurs swelled. Several guests raised phones to record. Claire, James's assistant, hurried over, whispering frantically, "James, we have to manage this. The press is going wild." But James barely heard her. His gaze pleaded with Simone for an explanation. "You didn't know because you weren't there," Simone answered, bitterness edging her tone. "You chose San Francisco, your ambitions. I called and wrote, but you never replied. When I gave birth to Malik and Jamal, where were you, James?" She paused, drawing a breath to keep tears at bay. "I'm not here to apologize or beg. I'm here for the community center, for other children. But you needed to know the truth." Though painful, her words held an unshakable strength, as if she had waited 16 years to say them aloud. James shook his head as if refusing reality. He remembered those last Brooklyn days, the tech startup offer, the promise that he'd return in a few months, that they would build a socially driven investment firm together. San Francisco had swept him away. Meetings, contracts, glittering lights. He stopped answering her messages, assuming she had moved on. Now, facing Malik and Jamal, he understood the magnitude of his mistake. "Simone," he rasped, "if I had known, I would have." But the sentence died in his throat. The truth was too heavy. Still guarding his mother, Malik glanced at Jamal. Their eyes met in silent conversation. They didn't grasp the entire story, but they felt her pain. "Mom, let's go," Malik said, voice low yet firm. Jamal nodded, clutching her hand tighter. Simone looked at her sons, then at James, her gaze a blend of hurt and pride. "We need nothing from you," she said, calm but unyielding. "But they deserve to know who their father is." Turning away, she guided Malik and Jamal out of the ballroom, leaving James motionless amid flashing lights and murmuring onlookers. Inside James, a storm raged. Guilt, shock, a fear he had never known. The terror of having lost what mattered most without ever realizing it. Claire tugged him from the spotlight, hissing, "James, we need a statement now. The media will tear this apart." But James barely registered her words. His heart was heavy, and his eyes trailed the retreating figures of Simone and their sons. The secret that had just exploded open would reshape the Gala and the rest of his life. The Plaza Hotel ballroom echoed with hushed murmurs long after Simone Carter had walked out, guiding Malik and Jamal behind her. James Whitaker remained frozen under the assault of flashbulbs and probing eyes. The revelation that Malik and Jamal were his sons had detonated like an earthquake, collapsing the gleaming facade James had built over the last 16 years. He didn't hear Claire, his assistant, whispering urgently for him to return to the podium and manage the fallout. He didn't see the paparazzi aiming lenses at him to capture this rare moment of vulnerability. In his mind, time was rewinding. 16 years back to Brooklyn, to the final days when he and Simone were still two young dreamers, full of ambition and love. It was 2009. In a dusty old community college library in Brooklyn, James and Simone often sat side by side, surrounded by borrowed textbooks and the scent of aging paper. James, a white American business student with light brown hair and piercing blue eyes, was overflowing with ambition. He dreamed of starting an investment firm that could change the world, not just turn a profit, but make a social impact. Simone, a Black American literature student with a radiant smile and an idealistic heart, kept him grounded. She challenged his bold ideas, asked him whether money could bring happiness, and shared her dream to build a youth center in Harlem, the community where she had grown up. They were the perfect pair, James with his risk-taking drive, Simone with her depth and vision. Afternoons in the library often stretched into night, debating pH, philosophy, economics, and the future under dim lamps. They dreamed of a socially responsible firm, with James handling strategy and Simone ensuring community impact. One evening, beneath a star-sprinkled sky outside campus, James had held Simone's hand and promised, "We're going to do this, Simone. Together." She had smiled, resting her head on his shoulder, believing their love was strong enough to weather anything. But the storm came sooner than expected. A tech startup in San Francisco offered James a job, high pay, career acceleration, and a fast track into the startup world. It was a chance he couldn't refuse, but it meant leaving Simone, who had just been accepted into a graduate research program in New York. "Just a few months," James had said, voice trembling, as they stood outside the library the night before his flight. "I'll lay the foundation, then come back. We'll start our firm." Simone, eyes glistening, squeezed his hand tighter. "Promise me," she whispered. James nodded and kissed her forehead. "You're my forever." But when the plane took off, neither knew Simone was pregnant. San Francisco consumed him. Meetings, deals, the intoxicating glow of startup life. He called Simone several times, but the calls grew infrequent and eventually stopped. He assumed she'd moved on. He didn't know she was facing something far greater than any dream they'd once shared. In a flickering lit room of a public hospital in Harlem, Simone lay in a hospital bed, sweat on her brow, cradling two newborn boys in her arms. Malik, the older by minutes, wailed loudly. Smaller and quieter, Jamal curled into her chest as if seeking safety. She was only 21, alone, no family support, no James. The doctor had left. Her only close friend, Aisha, had run out to buy food. In the silence, Simone looked down at her sons as tears fell quietly. Not from physical pain, but from the brutal truth. She would raise these boys on her own. On the table beside her lay a graduation photo of her and James, smiling wide. She turned the photo face down, whispering to herself, "I'll do this, even without you." Life in Harlem was unrelenting. As a young Black single mother, Simone bore the full weight of society's judgment. Neighbors murmured that she was too young for 2 kids and would make it. Rent hikes forced her into 3 jobs: bartender by day, tutor by evening, office cleaner by night. There were nights she sat beside Malik and Jamal's beds, lullabying them with a hoarse voice, wondering if she had the strength to go on. But each morning, seeing their smiles gave her a reason to fight another day. From nothing, she built the Harlem Community Center, a haven for other children like hers. But the cost was steep. Invisible scars from abandonment and years of loneliness no one could honestly share. Now, standing before James in the Plaza ballroom, all of it surged back like a wave. She had spoken the truth, not to punish or beg, but because Malik and Jamal deserved to know who their father was. Yet when she looked into James's eyes, she saw the shock and guilt, and a part of her, small, hesitant, wavered. Had he truly not known? Could he change? Beside her, Malik clutched her hand tighter, anger flaring in his eyes. "We don't need him, Mom," he whispered, voice trembling. Jamal said nothing, but looked at James with curiosity tinged by fear, as if trying to understand who this man was. James, still frozen, felt his chest constrict. He wanted to step forward, to say something, anything, to the boys. But Malik's defensive stare held him back. "Simone," James croaked, voice gravelly. "We need to talk, please." But Simone shook her head and turned away, guiding her sons through the stunned crowd. In her heart, a single question echoed. Was this the beginning of healing, or the opening of a new wound? The morning after the gala, pale sunlight crept through the windows of James Whitaker's Park Avenue penthouse, but he felt no warmth. He sat on a leather armchair in the living room, still wearing the white dress shirt from the night before. His silver cufflinks lay discarded on the table beside a cold cup of coffee. His phone buzzed non-stop. Messages from Claire, his assistant, warning about the press frenzy. Clickbait headlines spreading online like wildfire. Gala shock. Millionaire Whitaker has secret sons. But James didn't care about the media. The image of Simone Carter consumed his mind. Her eyes unwavering and wounded. And the two boys he'd just learned were his sons, Malik and Jamal. Last night, after Simone had led the boys out of the Plaza ballroom, James had remained rooted in place as though his heart had been anchored to her words. "They are our sons." He'd tried to call after her, but she hadn't turned around. Sitting alone in his pristine, echoing penthouse, James battled a storm of emotions. Guilt for abandoning Simone, shock at the truth about his sons, and a new fear that they might never accept him. He thought back to his years in San Francisco, how he'd buried himself in work to forget the ache of losing Simone, believing she had moved on. He'd had no idea she was pregnant, no idea she had given birth to twin boys in a public hospital in Harlem, alone, facing judgment and hardship. The truth cut deep, stripping away the confident persona he had carefully constructed. Meanwhile, Simone sat at the kitchen table in a modest apartment in Harlem, holding a cup of hot tea. Her expression was tired, but resolute. In the other room, soft rap music leaked from Malik's headphones. On the previous night's way home, he asked Mom why he hadn't told us about him. His voice was sharp, but Simone had sensed the pain beneath it. Jamal, as always, had remained quiet, simply holding her hand tighter. She had answered, "I wanted to protect you." But inside, she was wrestling with doubt. Her decision to reveal the truth at the gala had been spontaneous, not meant to hurt James, but to assert her son's existence. Now, she questioned herself. Would James try to be part of their lives or vanish like he had before? The fear of being betrayed again kept her awake. In her journal, she wrote, "I want to believe he can change, but I can't let my boys get hurt." That morning, James made a decision. He couldn't let it end at the gala. He put on a simple sweater, left the tailored suits behind, and drove to Harlem with a tray of coffee and pastries from a local bakery. Standing in front of Simone's apartment, a red brick building with rusted iron stairs, he felt like a stranger in another world. No flashbulbs, no polished smiles, just a door and the pounding of his heart. He knocked. Malik opened it, his gaze ice cold. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice edged with suspicion. James raised the tray awkwardly, forcing a faint smile. I wanted to talk. To your mom, and to both of you." Simone appeared behind Malik, arms crossed, her expression guarded. "James, this isn't a good time," she said, her voice low but firm. But James didn't back away. "Simone, I know I don't deserve it, but I need to understand. I need to know my sons." He looked past her to Malik and Jamal, who stood quietly behind. "Please, just a few minutes." Simone hesitated, eyes flicking to her boys. Malik shook his head, but in a soft voice, Jamal said, "Mom, let him talk." Simone sighed, then opened the door wider. "5 minutes," she said, "and don't hurt them." In the cramped living room, worn sofa, children's drawings on the walls, James sat across from Malik and Jamal. He tried to find the right words, but Malik's burning stare left him speechless. "I didn't know about you," he began, voice shaking. "If I had—" Malik cut him off, voice sharp. "If you had, what? Come back? You left my mom. You didn't care." James bowed his head, guilt crashing over him. "I was wrong," he said softly, "but I want to make it right if you'll let me try." Still silent, Jamal surprised them with a question. "Why now? What do you want from us?" The question, gentle as it was, sliced through James like a blade. He had no polished answer, only the truth. "Because I want to be your father, even if it's late." Outside, the Harlem neighborhood was already buzzing. News of the gala spread fast. Friends like Aisha, called Simone, are skeptical of James's motives. "He wants to save face," Aisha warned over the phone. "Don't let him hurt you again." The community watched, whispers of, "He doesn't belong here," trailing James like shadows. Simone, feeling that pressure, remained cautious. She watched James attempt to speak with her sons and wondered, was he truly changing or just playing a new role? After a few minutes, Malik stood abruptly and walked out of the room without another word. Jamal stayed, but his eyes remained wary. James looked to Simone, silently pleading. "I don't expect them to forgive me right away," he said, "but I'll come back, if you let me." Simone didn't respond. She opened the door. As James stepped out, the Harlem sunlight struck his face, but he felt only cold. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time, he wanted to fight for something unrelated to wealth or image. He tried to fight for them. In the days following the awkward visit to the Harlem apartment, James Whitaker felt as though he was walking a tightrope. One wrong move could either bring him closer to Malik and Jamal or send him plunging into a chasm of rejection. The Park Avenue penthouse that once symbolized his success now felt like a hollow shell. He sat for hours, staring out at the Manhattan skyline, asking himself the same question over and over. How do you make up for 16 years of silence? The media frenzy hadn't calmed. Headlines still flooded the internet. Real estate mogul faces the past at charity gala. Whitaker's hidden family secret rocks. Manhattan Claire, his assistant, kept emailing crisis PR strategies. James ignored them all. He didn't want to control the press. He wanted something far more fragile, the hearts of two boys who had every reason not to trust him. Meanwhile, in Harlem, Simone Carter returned to her daily rhythm at the community center with practiced grace. But inside, She was a battleground of conflicting emotions. Her revelation at the gala hadn't just upended her sons' lives. It had reopened wounds she'd spent years stitching closed. Each night, after Malik and Jamal went to bed, she sat alone at the kitchen table, writing in her journal to make sense of her thoughts. I'm terrified of letting James into their lives. If he leaves again, I won't be able to forgive myself. Outside, pressure only deepened her anxiety. Aisha, her closest friend, made her opinion plain. Simone, he's a rich white man. He doesn't understand Harlem. He's here to ease his guilt, then he'll vanish. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors. He's just playing hero. She doesn't need him. She raised those boys alone. Simone couldn't stop wondering. Was giving him a chance naive or necessary? But James, despite the skepticism, didn't walk away. He started appearing in Harlem more frequently, not in designer suits, but in plain sweaters and sneakers. He brought pastries from local bakeries and stopped by the community center with quiet offers to help. One Saturday morning, he arrived with a box of cookies and asked if he could repair a broken bookshelf in the library. Simone, busy guiding a group of teens through a mentorship session, eyed him warily. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. James shrugged, offering a thin smile. I want to. And I want to be near the boys. She said nothing, only gave a slight nod, but her gaze remained guarded. Malik and Jamal, at the center for a weekend basketball clinic, spotted James immediately. Malik folded his arms, his expression sharp. What are you doing here again? He asked, voice hard. Jamal stood behind him, silent, eyes flicking to the cookie box with restrained curiosity. James took a deep breath, trying to steady his voice. We could talk, or play chess, or I could help with homework. Malik scoffed. We don't need your help. Mom's been enough. But Jamal surprised everyone by softly saying, I've got a math problem, if you want to try. Malik gave his brother a side glance, brow furrowing, but didn't stop him. In a quiet corner of the center, James sat beside Jamal, flipping open his math book. Malik lingered nearby, pretending to read a magazine but watching closely. James, clumsy with middle school algebra, listened carefully as Jamal explained. You're smart, James said sincerely. Jamal blushed. I'm just okay. That small moment, a shared laugh over a wrong answer, felt like sunlight breaking through thick clouds. A first step, but it didn't last long. Malik soon walked over, voice cool. Don't think helping with math means we'll call you Dad. James nodded, not pushing. I don't expect that. I want to be here. Outside the center, Harlem's whispers continued. A group of parents, waiting to pick up their kids, watched James. Who does he think he is? One woman muttered. Simone's done fine on her own. Aisha overheard and pulled Simone aside after work. You need to be careful. The press is still watching. If he hurts Malik or Jamal, Harlem won't forgive it. Simone nodded, but the same question kept gnawing at her. Is James trying to stay? Or just trying to quiet his guilt? That evening, back at home, she sat down with her sons. What do you two think of him? She asked gently. Malik shrugged, voice tight. He means nothing to me. He left you, and now he wants to pretend he cares? It's not that easy. Jamal, quiet for a long while, finally said, He seems like he's trying, but I don't know. Simone pulled them both into her arms, her heart aching. She knew this journey would demand more than apologies. It would require consistency, time, and the ability to withstand not just her son's doubts, but her own. Back in his penthouse, James sat alone that night, looking at an old photo. Him and Simone outside the Brooklyn Library, youthful, laughing. He whispered to himself, "I won't quit." But he knew that to earn their trust, he'd have to face not only their pain, but the judgment of an entire community. And perhaps, most daunting of all, the question beating in his chest, am I truly ready to be the man they need me to be? One late autumn afternoon, golden sunlight filtered through the trees in Harlem's Central Park, mingling with children laughing and basketballs bouncing against concrete. The scent of dry leaves lingered in the air. James Whitaker, now more familiar with the streets of Harlem, arrived at the park in a denim jacket and sneakers, carrying a worn-out basketball under his arm. He had arranged to meet Malik and Jamal here after Simone reluctantly agreed to let him spend some time with them. Just 1 hour, she had warned, her eyes still sharp with mistrust. And if they're uncomfortable, you stop immediately. James had nodded, heart pounding. He knew this wasn't just another visit, but a chance to prove he wasn't here for redemption. He was here to be present. On the court, Malik took focused shots at the hoop, while Jamal sat on a bench, headphones in, music low. When James appeared, Malik paused, crossed his arms, and gave a steely stare. "You're late," he said coldly. James offered a sheepish smile, holding up the ball. "Traffic, but I brought this. Want to play a game?" Malik didn't reply, just shrugged. Jamal, however, stood and removed his headphones, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "I'll play," he said softly. Malik glared at his brother, but still stepped onto the court, as if unwilling to leave Jamal alone with James. The game began, clumsy and tense. James, despite his height, was far from a skilled player. Malik didn't hold back. "You shoot like an older man," he sneered, stealing the ball effortlessly. Jamal chuckled, his first genuine laugh around James. Then came a misstep. Jamal slipped during a rebound, landing hard on his knee. Blood welled up from the scrape. James dropped to the ground instantly, panic flashing in his eyes as he pulled out a handkerchief and gently dabbed the wound. "You okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Jamal nodded, cheeks flushed, half from pain, half from being fussed over. A few feet away, Malik watched the scene, emotions shifting behind his guarded stare. Distrust, perhaps, but something softer beneath it. From afar, Simone stood beneath a tree, arms folded, eyes locked on the court. She had come to ensure her sons were safe and see how James would handle it. Watching him tend to Jamal, she felt her chest tighten. She remembered nights in the Harlem apartment when Malik had high fevers, or Jamal cried from nightmares, and she had no one to lean on. James hadn't been there, but now he was trying. Still, fear anchored her heart. Last night, in her journal, she had written, "I want to believe him, but if he hurts them, I won't survive it." That morning, Aisha had called again. "Simone, he doesn't belong here. Don't let him ruin what you've built." Back on the court, James rose and tossed the ball to Malik. "Want to go again?" he asked gently. Malik hesitated, then caught the ball and nailed a three-pointer. James clapped, laughing. "You're excellent." Malik didn't smile, but the corner of his mouth twitched, as if he almost did. On the bench, Jamal began talking about a song he was writing. James listened intently, nodding as though it was the most essential thing in the world. That moment, fleeting, delicate, was the first spark of connection. Not forgiveness, but the beginning of something. Not everything went smoothly. As they left the court, a group of teens, Malik's friends, spotted James. One boy, Devin, smirked. "So this is the millionaire dad, huh? Came to flex his money?" Malik flushed red, saying nothing. Sensing the tension, James responded quietly, "I'm not here to show off, to play ball with my sons." Devon shrugged, unconvinced. His eyes still carried judgment. Word had spread through Harlem, and many, parents and staff at the community center, still saw James as an outsider, a wealthy white man who didn't understand their world. That night, back at the apartment, Simone gathered her sons. "How was today?" she asked softly. Malik shrugged, voice rigid. "He tries too hard. I don't need him." Jamal, silent for a while, finally said, "He's not that bad. He listened when I talked about music." Simone wrapped her arms around them, her heart heavy. She knew Malik was guarding himself, his anger, his pain. Tender and hopeful, Jamal was searching for something, perhaps a connection he'd never had. And she knew this path wouldn't be easy, not for James, not for her, and certainly not for the boys. Harlem was still watching, still skeptical. Later, in his penthouse, James sat at his desk, staring at an old college photo. Him and Simone smiling outside the Brooklyn Library. He thought of Malik's shot, Jamal's half-smile, the way Simone had watched him from the trees. Those small things gave him hope, but he also remembered Devon's stare, the guardedness in Simone's eyes. He whispered to himself, "I have to be patient, not for me, for them." Yet deep down, he also wondered, do I have the strength to tear down the wall that 16 years of absence built? Winter had begun to blanket Harlem in a soft veil of frost. The red brick streets shimmered under the glow of streetlights, and James Whitaker, now more at home in the neighborhood, no longer arrived in luxury cars or expensive suits. He drove an old sedan, wore a thick wool coat, and carried with him a decision that would change his life forever. After countless sleepless nights staring at a faded photo of himself and Simone in college, James decided to step down as CEO of the real estate empire he had co-founded. He sold his shares, sacrificing millions and severing ties with some of the most powerful people in New York, all for one reason: to be a father to Malik and Jamal. And, just maybe, to be something more than a memory to Simone. The decision sent shockwaves through New York's business world. His partners didn't hide their disbelief at a tense Wall Street board meeting. "You're throwing away everything we built," one exclaimed. James, seated at the end of the table, replied quietly, "I have already missed 16 years with my sons. I'm not missing any more." The headlines came fast. Millionaire Whitaker abandons empire for secret family. But in Harlem, the response was less enthusiastic. The community remained skeptical. Some saw it as a PR stunt, others as the impulsive guilt of a rich man trying to rewrite his legacy. Simone Carter heard the news at the Harlem Community Center from Aisha, her ever-wary best friend. "You heard? He quit the company," Aisha said, her voice thick with suspicion. Another move to get good press. In the middle of organizing documents for the teen outreach program, Simone froze. Her hand trembled slightly. She didn't know what to think. Part of her wanted to believe James had changed, but another part, the one that had survived long nights raising two boys alone, remained afraid he'd disappear the moment the guilt wore off. In her journal that night, she wrote, "If he's sincere, I'll see it through his actions, not words. But I can't let the boys hope and be crushed again." Malik and Jamal, now used to James's presence, had conflicting reactions. One afternoon, James arrived to pick them up from basketball practice. Malik eyed him sharply. "He said he heard you quit your company," his tone thick with sarcasm. "Trying to make headlines?" James shook his head, calm. "No, Malik. I did it because I want to spend time with you and Jamal." Malik rolled his eyes and walked ahead. Jamal, quieter, stayed behind and asked softly, You quit your job. For us? James nodded. And for your mom. I was wrong to leave before. I don't want to make that mistake again. That evening, Simone invited James to stay for dinner, for the first time. It was a modest meal, spaghetti and salad, prepared by Simone and Jamal. Malik sat at the table's edge, silent, occasionally glancing at James as if looking for cracks. While doing dishes, James recounted a college memory, sneaking into a free concert in Brooklyn with Simone. She sang so loud the crowd turned around, he said, laughing. Jamal burst out laughing. Even Malik, trying to stay indifferent, allowed the corner of his mouth to twitch. It was small, but a crack of light in their crowded kitchen. Still, the doubt lingered. Later that night, Malik pulled Simone aside. Why'd you let him stay? He asked, frustrated. He'll leave again, just like before. Simone embraced him, her voice steady. I don't know what he'll do, Malik. But I want to give him a chance. Not for him, but for you and Jamal. Jamal, sitting on the sofa, added quietly, he talked about music with me. He knew my favorite song. Simone looked at them both, her heart heavy. Malik was protecting his heart. Jamal was searching for a connection. And James, despite his awkwardness, was trying. Outside their apartment, Harlem kept murmuring. At a parent meeting at the center, a woman named Carla said to Simone, I don't trust him. He doesn't know us. Harlem is not a playground for the wealthy. Simone nodded outwardly, but inside, a faint thread of hope stirred. James hadn't just shown up at the center or on the court. He had started asking questions about the youth programs and Harlem itself. He even helped patch the center's roof after a storm caused a leak. These small things made Simone wonder, could he be changing? Back in his now downsized apartment on the Upper West Side, just blocks from Harlem, James sat at a desk, writing a list in a small notebook. Take Malik to a Knicks game. Buy Jamal new songwriting books. Ask Simone about the Teen Leadership Initiative. He knew this road would be hard. Harlem didn't welcome easily, but remembering Jamal's soft smile and the flicker of something unspoken in Malik's eyes, James felt a new kind of resolve, one not driven by legacy or wealth, but by something much more human, the need to be part of a family he had once walked away from and was now willing to fight for. Spring arrived in Harlem, bringing budding green leaves and a gentle warmth that crept along the red brick streets. The Harlem Community Center, the place Simone Carter had spent a decade building, became the heart of a special event, a community gala, not glamorous like the one at the Plaza Hotel, but warm, intimate, and infused with the spirit of the neighborhood. James Whitaker and Simone co-hosted the event, not to boast or raise millions, but to honor the stories of Harlem. Children who had overcome hardship, resilient families, and dreams nurtured within the center's walls. But for James, this gala was also a chance to prove to Simone, Malik, and Jamal that he had changed, not just with words, but through action. Unlike the previous gala, there were no crystal chandeliers or expensive tuxedos. The community hall was decorated with student paintings, paper lanterns made by volunteers, and the smell of toasted bread from Mrs. Rose's kitchen, a mother from the neighborhood. James, dressed in a simple blue shirt, stood in a corner helping hang a hand-painted banner that read, Harlem, where hope begins. In a simple floral dress, Simone directed the volunteers with a radiant smile, though worry still flickered in her eyes. She knew this gala was a big step, not just for the center, but for the fragile relationship with James. She had written in her journal the night before, I see him trying, but I'm still afraid. I don't want to wake up if this is just a dream. Malik and Jamal, now 16, also lent a hand. Still wearing his stern expression, Malik helped assemble the small stage for the music performance. With a guitar in hand, Jamal prepared to play an original song, a gift to the center. When James approached, Malik shot him a glare but said nothing. Jamal, more reserved, gave a slight nod, his eyes lighting up when James said, "I heard your song is something special." That small moment, though brief, eased Simone's heart a little from where she stood across the room. But she also felt the weight of Harlem's scrutiny. While arranging tables, Aisha whispered, "Are you sure, Simone?" "He's trying, but Harlem doesn't forgive easily." The event began, and the hall was packed. Parents, students, neighbors. There are no press cameras. They are just raised phones capturing joy. Simone took the stage, her voice ringing with pride. "Tonight, we're not just celebrating the center. We're celebrating each other, the people who make Harlem a family." The crowd applauded, and she invited James to speak. Slightly nervous, James walked up, clutching a small piece of paper. "I'm not good at talking about feelings," he began, his voice unsteady. "But I'm here to thank Harlem and Simone, Malik and Jamal. You've taught me that family isn't something you have. It's something you build." He paused, eyes scanning the crowd for Simone. "I missed 16 years," he continued, his voice growing hoarse. "I can't change the past, but I can promise to stay, not for fame or fortune, but because I love my sons and the woman who raised them." The crowd fell silent, then burst into applause. Standing at the edge of the stage, arms crossed, Malik had a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Sitting in the front row, Jamal smiled softly, gently plucking at his guitar strings. Behind the curtain, Simone felt tears welling up, but held them back. Her heart caught between hope and fear. Suddenly, James stepped off the stage and walked straight toward Simone. In front of everyone, he knelt on one knee and pulled out a simple silver ring. "Simone," he said, his voice trembling, "I won't promise perfection, but I promise to stay, to build this life with you and the boys. Will you continue this journey with me?" The room held its breath. Simone, stunned, covered her mouth, her eyes drifting to Malik and Jamal. After a brief hesitation, Malik gave a slight nod, his eyes glistening. Jamal smiled and gave a thumbs up. Simone looked at James, her heart pounding. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "We'll build it together." The crowd erupted in applause, some wiping away tears. Yet Simone still felt a flicker of anxiety. Not about James, but about the journey ahead. After the promise, Jamal took the stage and played his song, a gentle melody about family and forgiveness. Malik, for the first time, stood near James. He said nothing, but he didn't walk away. The Harlem community, though still holding some doubts, began to see James in a different light. Mrs. Rosa, the baker, patted his shoulder and said, "You did well, but you've got to keep going." James nodded, his eyes filled with determination. Back at their apartment, Simone sat with Malik and Jamal that night. "What do you think?" she asked. Malik, his voice deeper than usual, said, "He seems sincere, but I'm not ready to call him Dad." Jamal added, "I like the song tonight." He clapped the loudest. Simone hugged her sons, feeling a cautious peace. She knew James had changed, but Harlem, and her own heart, would need time to accept him fully. Back in his small Upper West Side apartment, James sat down to write a letter to Simone that he didn't send right away. "Thank you for giving me a chance. I won't let you or the boys down." He looked out the window, Harlem's lights shimmering in the distance, and for the first time in years, he felt he was on the right path. Summer arrived in Harlem, bringing humid heat and the persistent hum of cicadas over the red brick streets. After the community gala, James Whitaker became a familiar part of Simone Carter's life, and of Malik and Jamal's. He was no longer the distant millionaire in a suit. Still, a man who showed up in old t-shirts, helped fix Jamal's bike, took Malik to basketball games, and supported the Harlem Community Center with simple acts, painting walls and donating books. He moved into a small apartment in Harlem, leaving behind his Upper West Side place to be closer to the family. But the path to reconnection was far from smooth. The wounds from 16 years of absence still lingered, and a significant challenge was approaching, one that would test James's patience and Simone's trust. Simone, though more open since James's promise at the gala, still maintained a cautious distance. She saw him trying. He was present at Malik's basketball games, listened to Jamal practice guitar, and even learned to cook Harlem dishes from Mrs. Rosa to prepare dinner for the family. But memories returned each time she saw him smiling at the boys, of long nights alone in their cramped apartment when Malik had a fever, or Jamal cried from nightmares. In her journal, she wrote, "I see that he's changed, but I'm still afraid, not of him, but of trusting again and breaking all over." Pressure from the Harlem community hadn't eased either. Though many, like Mrs. Rosa, began to accept James, others, like Aisha, still warned her, "Simone, he doesn't understand us. When things get hard, he'll leave." With his protective nature and deeply wounded heart, Malik remained James's biggest obstacle. Though he was no longer openly hostile, Malik kept his distance, refusing to call James dad and often snapping when James got too involved. One afternoon, the boy exploded when James offered to help Malik practice for the school basketball tournament. "Stop pretending you know me," Malik shouted, slamming the ball to the court. "You weren't there when I needed you. Now what? Do you think you can replace those years? Not happening." He ran off, leaving James frozen in place, his heart heavy. Watching from the bench, Jamal turned to James with a worried look. "He doesn't hate you," he said quietly. "He's just scared." Simone, after Jamal told her, felt torn inside. She knew Malik was struggling with the pain of growing up fatherless, and James's presence brought both hope and fear. She found James sitting alone on a bench in the park, staring into the distance. "You can't force Malik," she said, her voice soft but firm. "He needs time." James nodded, voice hoarse. "I know, but I'm scared I'm not good enough. For him, for either of them." Simone, for the first time, placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "Just keep showing up. That's what matters most." That moment, though small, was a step forward in their relationship. James decided to look for Malik. He drove around Harlem, asking his friends at the community center, and finally found Malik sitting on the iron stairs of an old building, his eyes red. James sat beside him, silent for a while. He said quietly, "I'm not trying to replace the years we lost. I want to be your dad now, if you'll let me." Malik, after a pause, looked at him. He said, trembling, "I don't know if I can trust you. Mom did everything alone. You don't know how hard it was." James nodded, his own eyes misting. "I don't. But I want to learn, Malik." The boy didn't respond, but he stood up and let James walk beside him on the way home for the first time. Back at the apartment, Simone prepared a family dinner that evening. Pasta with homemade tomato sauce, Malik's favorite. James brought a plate of cookies from Mrs. Rosa, making Jamal giggle. Malik stayed quiet, but didn't leave the table as early as usual. When James shared a story about messing up a college presentation from sheer nervousness, Jamal burst out laughing, and Malik, trying to hide it, let out a faint smile. From the kitchen, Simone felt a flicker of warmth enter her heart. But she also knew the challenges weren't over. Not just Malik's trust, but financial issues. With James leaving his company, he no longer had a significant income, and the community center struggled with its budget. She wondered if they could face these real-life hardships together. The Harlem community, though still divided, began to see James differently. During a meeting at the center, Mrs. Rosa publicly thanked him for helping repair the roof after the storm. But Aisha, in a private conversation with Simone, still cautioned, "Don't trust too quickly. Harlem doesn't need heroes. We need people who stay." Simone nodded, but in her heart, a decision was forming. She would give James a chance, not for him, but because Malik and Jamal deserved a father who tried. Back at his small Harlem apartment, James sat down and wrote a new list. Sign up for a cooking class with Simone. Buy concert tickets for Jamal. Take Malik to a basketball tournament. He looked out the window, Harlem's lights sparkling in the night, and felt that despite the challenges, he was getting closer to the family he had once lost. 1 year after the community gala, Harlem welcomed autumn with golden leaves falling gently over the red brick streets. The family of Simone Carter, James Whitaker, Malik, and Jamal had found their rhythm. Imperfect, but filled with love. Now an inseparable part of Harlem, James was no longer a distant millionaire, but a devoted volunteer at the community center, a clumsy but patient father, and Simone's steadfast companion. His small apartment in Harlem, with Jamal's paintings hanging on the walls and Malik's basketball in the corner, had become a second home for the entire family. But the journey to this point had not been easy, and the simple moments they shared now resulted from persistence, forgiveness, and hope. On a Saturday morning, the whole family gathered in the backyard of the community center, where they had decided to plant a young oak tree to mark 1 year since the gala. James, wearing a dirt-streaked gray t-shirt, was digging the hole with Malik, sweat beading on his forehead. He said, digging a little deeper. Malik laughed as the boy shot him a look. "Stop giving orders. Do it yourself," Malik replied, his tone laced with teasing. Nearby, Jamal strummed a gentle tune on his guitar, while Simone brought a tray of homemade lemonade. She looked at the scene, heart at ease, but still carrying the memories of difficult years. In her journal the night before, she had written, "I used to be afraid of letting James into our lives. But now, I see the boys are happy, and I am too, even if there are still uncertain days." Once doubtful of James, the Harlem community had slowly begun to accept him. Mrs. Rosa, the neighborhood's famed baker, often brought bread to the center and joked, "Mr. Whitaker, I won't forgive you if you let this oak tree die." Even Aisha, though still cautious, admitted to Simone, "He stayed longer than I expected. Maybe I was wrong." But that acceptance hadn't come easily. James had faced scrutinizing stares, sharp questions from parents, and financial hardship after leaving his company. He began working part-time as a business advisor for small Harlem enterprises, helping them grow without leaving the neighborhood. These small actions slowly changed how the community viewed him. Malik had once lashed out at James and had opened up more. One evening, after a school basketball game, he unexpectedly called James's dad and asked him to tie his shoelace. James froze, his eyes misting, but nodded, not wanting to embarrass the boy. Jamal, always the more sensitive of the two, had long since warmed to James. He wrote a song about family and performed it at the center. When James clapped the loudest, Jamal ran to hug him. These small moments were signs of healing. But Malik and Jamal still carried scars from the past. In one conversation with Simone, Malik confessed, "I used to think he'd leave, but now I see he's trying, and I want to believe." Simone, who had once kept her distance to protect her heart, had now let James into her life. They didn't rush, There was no engagement right after the gala, but they built together daily. One afternoon, while cleaning up the center after class, James unexpectedly reached for her hand. "Thank you for giving me a chance," he said, his voice low. Simone smiled and gently squeezed his hand. "Thank you for staying," she replied. In that moment, beneath Harlem's sunset, was an unspoken promise, not about perfection, but presence. One day, Malik came home with a drawing from art class. 4 people, Simone, James, Malik, and Jamal, standing beneath an oak tree, holding hands. "I drew this for the center," he said awkwardly. Simone, eyes brimming with tears, hugged him tightly and pinned the drawing on the fridge next to a family photo from the community gala. That drawing, with its imperfect lines, symbolized their journey. Not an ideal family, but a real one, built through scars and love. The Harlem community had become part of this story, while not entirely free of prejudice. Simone was invited to speak at another community center event. She stood on stage, her voice ringing with pride. "Harlem is not just where we live, it's where we heal. My story, my son's and James's, prove that anything can be rewritten if we choose to stay." The crowd applauded, and in the back row, James, Malik, and Jamal stood together, their eyes shining with trust. The story ends with the family having breakfast in Simone's apartment. Burnt pancakes made by James, Malik laughing as he teased him, and the soft notes of Jamal's guitar echoing from the corner of the room. Outside in the community center yard, the young oak tree, though small, had begun to sprout leaves. Its roots stretched deep into Harlem soil, like this family, imperfect but strong and full of hope.